found yourself feeling unhappy with your sewing output? You're making more items than your wardrobe can handle, or a lot of them are styles that you rarely wear in your regular life. My guest this week, Lena King, recently realised that her sewing output was no longer in alignment with her goals. In this episode, she talks about what was going wrong and what she plans to do about it. Welcome to Check Your Thread, the podcast that will help you sew more sustainably. My name's Zoe and I'm obsessed with sewing. I've been blogging about it for over 15 years and I'm the creator and host of the popular handmade wardrobe challenge Me Made May. But like many people, I've become increasingly concerned about the climate crisis and the way that my lifestyle contributes to it. So in this podcast, I'll be nerding out about making clothes whilst exploring how to minimise the negative impact that it may have. I really hope you'll join me in this journey. How are you doing, lovely listener? Very well, I hope. Are you sewing anything at the moment? I'm currently doing some pattern testing for a blouse pattern. I used to do quite a bit of pattern testing before I had kids, but usually I steer clear of it these days because my sewing time is pretty limited, so I only want to be making the things that I really want to make, But when I saw this blouse pattern, I knew it's exactly the type of garment that I love to wear. Plus, I already had a piece of fabric that I can use for it in my stash, which I've been itching to use and didn't have a plan for. On top of that, I've also been making a few little bits for a Christmas craft fair that I'm helping to organise. I've been making some scrunchies and some wash bags, but I've got plans for loads of other things that I can make out of scraps and leftovers and stuff that I've already got in my stash. So, sustainability wins and fails this week. Well, I'll do my fail first. So, as I mentioned back towards the end of the summer, when my family were away on a little trip, my son's shoes broke and we were about to go on a big walk. So I had to panic buy him some trainers from a supermarket, despite having others that he could have used back at home. Well, those trainers, although he loved them, they turned out to be such a piece of junk. The insides wore down, so they were completely unusable in such a short amount of time. So once again, I've learnt, do not buy footwear from a supermarket. But my sustainability win is that I just went through the stash of shoes that I have in future sizes for my kids, and I found 8 pairs in his size that I'd already acquired. A couple of the pairs are barely used hand-me-downs, but the rest were new or very nearly new ones that I'd picked up from charity shops. So out of the 8 pairs, 6 fit him really well, and hopefully he'll get some use from each of them before his feet grow again. And the other 2, I'll just redonate them to another charity shop. Big thanks this week to new patron Jenny for signing up to support the podcast via Patreon. And also big thanks to existing patron Heather for upping the amount of their support. You are both awesome. Normally, at this point, I'd ask that you kindly consider signing up to support the podcast. However, instead, this week I'd like to suggest that if you are able, you make a donation to an organisation that is trying to support civilians in danger in Gaza. Now, I know that I'm going to receive some flack for suggesting that, and it seems ridiculous to me that I need to make this disclaimer, but for the record, I do not support Hamas or their actions. I am not anti-Semitic in any way, and I do not condone the attacks that killed Israeli civilians. But right now, a horrendous atrocity is occurring that is resulting in the deaths of thousands of civilians in Gaza, including infants and children, and the remaining population desperately need whatever help we can give. Personally, I donated to Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders, but other organisations and charities that are trying to help include UNICEF, Save the Children, Amnesty International and Choose Love, and probably a heap more, so take your pick. And of course, you can email your MP to ask them to put pressure on the government in your country to call for a ceasefire. If you're in the UK and you don't know your MP's email address, just search for how to contact my MP and the right page on the government website should pop up. I emailed Peter Kyle, the MP for Hove and Port Slade, just a super quick and to the point email that took less than 2 minutes out of my day. Remember to include your postcode when you're emailing your MP so that they know that they actually represent you. A massive thanks to everyone who's been able to support the cause physically by attending marches and rallies calling for a ceasefire. You were amazing. But if you, like me, aren't able to attend a march in person at the moment, remember we can all do something. Putting that tragic situation aside for now, let's crack on with today's episode. It was such a pleasure to talk to Lena. It felt like we'd already met, even though we actually haven't. I loved talking to her about how her sewing has been falling short of her goals and what changes she's going to make. Then we went on to talk about how sewing can end up being deprioritised during times of stress and difficulties. And I'm very grateful to Lena for talking so openly about that. All the links to the stuff we talked about, plus some lovely pics, are, as usual, in the show notes, which you can find on checkyourthread.com. So, until next week, please take care of yourself and your loved ones, and enjoy. I really appreciate you talking to me today, Lena. Thank you so, so much. I kind of feel like I've already met you in the past. I know it sounds silly because I haven't actually spoken to you before.
No, I don't think so.
Because I've been listening to you on your stories. I've been listening to you on other podcasts, you know?
Yeah. It's a funny old world, isn't it, social media?
Absolutely. And I think the sewing community as well is a kind of microcosm. In fact, I was just messaging with my friend Naomi Bancroft earlier and she says to say hello.
Oh, hi. I really missed out of the knitting and stitching shows. I really wanted to see everybody, but I couldn't get down to it this time.
Oh, yeah. Well, maybe you could get to the one at Islington.
Yeah, probably will.
In the spring.
Hope so.
So I've had the pleasure of meeting you, via online before, but for everyone else, could you please let us know who you are, where you are, and what fills your days? Okay,
so yes, I'm Lena King, and I actually live in North London, in Islington, so I'm just up the road from the, the shows. I am a mum of two daughters, one fully grown and out of the house, and then I have a teenager at home. My days are filled with variety of stuff. I used to be a school teacher quite some time ago, but I did give that up when I had my first daughter and I wanted to homeschool. We decided we wanted to homeschool, so I homeschooled her pretty much all the way through. I homeschooled my second daughter, but she then went to secondary school, year 7. And it was then that I began to sort of think, I'm a bit of a loss now. So sewing sort of filled my days a lot. But I also do a lot of sort of freelance catering for various things, mostly within the sphere of the church and the church communities that I work with. I organise conferences as well, and I'm just do a little bit of everything. I'm based at home mostly, but then I do odd bits here and there. But catering is my main thing.
So you got fingers in pies,
yes,
literally and metaphorically.
Yes, absolutely. And that's why I couldn't be at the shows. I had a catering gig over the weekend, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So
great timing.
So it's just like bang there.
And you are how prolific would you say your sewing is at the moment?
Oh, wow, yeah. I am literally, I think I'm sewing something or got something on the table waiting to be sewn pretty much every week. I've got something going. And then having said that, I've cut out some fabric ready to sew and it's been sat on the table, but time means I can't do it. But I think once a month I'm pulling things out that I've finished and whatever. So I'm sewing on the go. It's continuous.
As and when.
Yeah.
Do you have a specific sewing area or is it dining room table?
It's dining room table. I've commandeered. So we've got a big through lounge here and the dining room table is mine plus a cabinet which used to have homeschool stuff, which is now just completely sewing stuff. But it does mean I've got to pack everything away or at least push it to one end of the table. So life can happen at the other end, but it has its consequences. I have managed to damage fabric by not clearing it away, and getting food or ink or whatever, because it's,
Lessons were learned.
Yes, definitely.
Well, let's go back a little bit because I would love to know a bit more about your background in sewing as well.
Sure.
So I understand that your mum was a trained dressmaker.
Yeah, she was. So my mum, bless her, she's going to be 81 in a couple of weeks' time. But she's always been one of these sort of super resourceful women. She's always like, I can do that. And I think I've taken that from her. But yeah, growing up, she was back in Ghana. She trained as a seamstress. Well, in Ghana, even now, that's a far more common thing. And everybody seems to have their own tailor or seamstress, and clothes are made for you a lot more than over here. So that's what she got trained in back in Ghana. And then when she actually came over to the UK, she started working in a factory, dressmaking. But she said the speed, it was just too fast for her. She's quite a slow sewist, like me. So she said, that's not for me. So instead, it was more of her sort of hobby. And the fact that I think back then it was cheaper to actually make your own clothes. So she sewed for herself and for me and my older sister, occasionally for friends and family, and doing alterations and things like that. So growing up for me, sewing was just the norm. And I kind of thought that that's what everybody's family, everybody's mum sewed.
Yeah.
Mum had a really big industrial sewing machine, actually. One
Oh,
of those.
she couldn't have been that slow then.
Yeah, that's what I think. I don't know what the factory was doing. I just don't know. They just wanted things made really, really quick, and she wasn't doing it. But she had an industrial sized sewing machine and an
Yeah, she
overlocker.
wasn't messing
She
around.
she was serious, and that machine, when it was going, the rumble of that machine and everything in our house were just normal background noises for me. This was
Sure.
just life. I mean, it sounds a bit funny, but I loved all those sounds. And I loved even the fact, the scissors crunching on the fabric. And my mum made her own patterns using newspaper. So there was always that rustle of
Right.
newspaper around. She didn't use commercial patterns. She just did things. You wanted something. And she said, okay, let me look at that. And she knew how to plan it all. And I loved it. I loved seeing what my mum made for us. I loved wearing what she made up to a certain age. and then
Sure.
I, like, not for me anymore, but it was just fascinating to just watch her create. Loved it.
Yeah. Amazing. Do you think there's still because you still have family in Ghana, don't
Yes. In
you?
fact, my parents have gone back to Ghana. They're back living there now. Yeah.
Right. Is she still sewing?
Not really. She has a little sewing machine and she'll do things like she'll sort of hem curtains and stuff like that. But actually, when she was over here, when she comes over to this country and has a bit of a holiday, she brought me things to sew for her and fix for her and
Oh,
take out, especially some of the more traditional Ghanaian clothing, which is very, very fitted. But amazingly, they have massive seam allowances to let you ebb and flow. So my mum was
I
saying,
love the ebb and
it's
flow. I
brilliant.
love
It's
that.
brilliant. So she will say, oh, Lena, can you just unpick this and make this,
Yeah, I've ebbed.
yeah, I've ebbed. So can I, it was lovely. So she doesn't really sew that much herself now, but she's loving that I sew.
Yeah. So at what point did you decide that you wanted to have a go yourself? Was it your mum that passed on the skills to you?
So I think just watching my mum a lot, I really wanted to have a go. And she was terrified of me using the industrial sewing machine.
Well, yeah.
She's like, no, you can watch what I do, but you can't use this machine. And then she later bought herself just a tabletop machine and began using that. And when I was 15, she gave it to me and said, right, this is
Oh,
yours. Because I think I'd been pestering her and watching her and taking scraps and trying to sew things. And the funny thing is that my mum, bless her, is not a great teacher. And I'm not very patient listening to her. So she trying to teach me didn't really work, but I was still eager to do it. I'm old enough to have had home economics when I was at school. So we did sewing and little cushions and pillowcases, and then we made a top. I remember that top, and it was so ugly. I don't think I wore it, but it just gave me that desire to sew. So my mum said, Lena, here's a sewing machine. I think she got me a magazine like Woman's Own or something, which had free patterns. Then here's a pattern, have a go. And that's what I started to do, just using bits of her fabric and seeing what I could make.
yeah. So she normalised
She
it and
did.
she
She
facilitated
did.
it, but you were kind of to a certain extent on your own with the actual experimentation and
Yes.
acquiring
Yeah. I mean,
knowledge.
obviously, I kept asking her, oh, how do you do this? And my mum helping put zips in and just telling me things about darts. She would just sort of tell me that, and I'd go and fiddle around myself. But
Yeah.
yeah, so from when I was 15, I was sewing, but I don't think I sewed anything that I actually wore outside of the house. I think I didn't have that confidence to wear my own things, I think, back then. They were a bit.
So did the confidence to make things that you were actually going to wear, did that happen when your youngest went to secondary school, or was that
In
before you
between,
already?
in between, I still was. So I think 15, messing around sewing, and then sort of in my 20s, I met a family who made all of their own clothes. A mother and the two daughters, they just sewed, and for them it was more
Oh,
from they really were into very modest clothing, and that's sort of background, and they just couldn't find what they wanted, so they sewed their own clothes. And I thought, okay, this looks interesting, and I, watched them sew, and it just again brought back that desire to sew. So again, this time I went off to sort of John Lewis or different fabric shops that I knew in my locality and started buying patterns and started making clothes that I liked. I made a little A-line skirt from, I think it was a Simplicity or McCall's pattern, really liked that and thought, yes, I'm actually going to wear this. Start doing that. And then when my eldest daughter was born, I made a few little pieces for her. But I think it was really when I came across some more indie patterns. First, I think it was seam work patterns was the first I came across. And I made a dress. It was this peony dress pattern, actually.
yes.
Beautiful, simple sort of sheath dress. And I made it out of some Ankara, some wax print fabric, and some beautiful red with yellow patterns on it. And I wore it to a wedding and it got so many compliments that I thought, I can actually do this and actually make things that
Yeah.
I love to wear and other people appreciate as well. So yeah, I kind of just went for it from then, really.
Yeah, amazing. So the A-line skirt and the Ankara peony were
Yes,
the
they
gateway. You
were.
were in.
I was in, and yeah, but then I had young children then, so it was hard for me anyway to fit it in with homeschooling and everything. So
Sure.
it was a lot.
Yeah, because by the time you get to the evening, even if you've got a little bit of
Yeah.
time, there's not a lot of energy
No,
left,
that's
is
it. The
there?
energy's not there. But it's always something I loved, and I knew that when I found more time, that's what I wanted to do. Wanted to get back
Yeah.
doing that.
Yeah, so what instigated this conversation? Oh, it's lovely, lovely to speak to you. But what instigated this conversation was a post that you made recently on Instagram about your wardrobe and making aims
Mm,
as you set them some time ago, and how that you had started to feel that you might not be adhering to those aims anymore or
yeah,
currently.
yeah.
Would you explain a little bit more about those aims as you set them previously?
Sure. So, yeah, I think when I started sewing more often was really when I joined Instagram and saw all these amazing sewists and all this creativity. And I was like, wow, that sort of really encouraged me to sew. And I started a blog, and the sort of strapline to my blog was finding joy in creating a useful and a beautiful, thoughtful wardrobe. And that was what I wanted to do because I'd been in some conversations with somebody on Instagram, and we were talking about the fact that although we were walking away from fast fashion, we felt that there was a danger of us being just speedy sewing. You're just swapping one for the other, and you're just
Sure,
sewing for
yeah.
the sake of sewing, and you're making clothes, and your wardrobe is filling, and you may be doing some of the things that you're running away from for fast fashion, maybe coming into your own sewing. So I wanted to be a bit more thoughtful about what I made. And it was very hard because your eyes are just being flooded often with new patterns,
Yeah,
new
yeah.
fabrics, great makes from different people, and you just want to do them all. I want to be creative, but I also want to be a little bit disciplined, which is maybe a word that we don't like using when we're being creative.
Oh no, I'm interested in that. Yeah, so what do you mean about discipline in terms of your creativity, in terms of your
Yeah, I
making?
do. I want to be free and I want to let my creativity flow, but I want to be disciplined in the fact that I'm thinking about what I'm doing. I'm not just making for the sake of it. I'm thinking, Lena, what do you like wearing? Lena, what do you need at the moment? What holes are? That's why I love your, Me Made May, because it forces you
Oh,
to have that thinking process. What do you actually need in your wardrobe? Where are the holes? Do you need that new pattern, or could you actually tweak this pattern you've got and make so that kind of discipline, not to just be buying, or saying yes to everybody who offered you something on Instagram as well, which was always very hard.
yeah, it is hard, isn't it? Because you're like, oh, this is a great opportunity, and I'm really grateful. And then
Absolutely.
also you don't want to disappoint them as well.
Yes.
And oh, I totally know what you
Yeah, and
mean. Yeah.
it gets a lot, and I love the opportunities, and I've had to sort of narrow down people I work with just so that I'm, again, that was a thoughtful and disciplined process of thinking. whose brand do I actually really love? Who am I happy to be getting fabric and patterns from and things like that? So it's just, again, narrowing things down. So yeah, with that post, I was looking at my wardrobe and thinking, okay, my styles evolve. I'm quite an eclectic person generally, but I was looking at my wardrobe and thinking, I just don't wear that because I don't like it. I don't like the way it sits on me or whatever, or that fabric is not really me, or why on earth did I make that? I've got no occasion for wearing that. That's just not fitting in my
Yeah.
lifestyle. So it was things like that that made me just think, Lena, let's go back to your original thoughts about dressmaking. And remember, you're making for you, not the person I think I want to be or the person I've seen on Instagram looking fabulous and going to fabulous places. That's not
Yeah,
me.
yeah, yeah. Good for them.
Exactly. And I'm all there saying wonderful things about them, but that's not my lifestyle. So I need to be thinking a little bit more about me and how I wear my clothes and what suits me and what I enjoy wearing. So that's what I really wanted to do. And when I put that post out there, I kind of thought it would have some traction with some people, but I was quite overwhelmed by just how much response I got from it.
Sure. It was wild.
Yeah, people were just coming, oh, I feel you. And other people are like, oh, but don't stamp out your creativity, or, and giving us lots of tips and thoughts. And it was really interesting conversation. So yeah, I'm really glad I put
It's
that
clearly on
post.
a lot of people's mind.
Definitely, definitely. And people are saying, okay, we're looking forward to seeing how you deal with this and what you go on to do as a, looking at your thought processes. What changes are you going to make? What things are you going to start doing? I thought, I'm glad I put it out there because it's also, again, something on me now to think I've put that there. I'm actually going to do it.
Ah, so the
So that you
accountability.
need that. And I'm often thankful for Instagram for that because I said I put it out there. I am going to do it. And
Yeah.
it's made me do that work of what in my wardrobe is something that I'm really going for and I want more of that style or whatever. So I'm doing the work.
Yeah, you totally are, because I've seen some posts since and you have been discussing some garments that you've got.
Yeah,
You've been analysing them. What is it that you like about it?
yeah.
What is it that, you would like to take forward into future
Mm.
projects? So yeah, it sounds like you're doing it in a really conscious kind
Oh,
of.
I am. I've got this little notebook actually.
Oh, a notebook as
Got my
well.
notebook, and
Amazing.
I just in that notebook, I thought I'd just think about the different categories. So I'm looking at the stuff in my wardrobe that I actually wear a lot. I'm looking at the fabrics that I love to wear and work with. I'm looking at the colors as well as the style. So, immediately I was like, Lena, we know, everybody knows I love African wax print. I love Ankara fabric. I
Oh, do you?
love the bright colors. So that's a must. That's not going anywhere. And most of my Ankara pieces I do work them. But I also love denim. I
Yeah.
love denim. And from the softest sort of chambray ones to, the more substantial, I love denim.
Yeah.
So I'm going to work with that. Even though it's maybe slower, maybe harder to work with sometimes, it's a great fabric that I enjoy working with.
And it works with so many other
It
garments as
really
well,
does.
doesn't
It really
it?
does. And so when I'm thinking of my clothes to wear, it's easy to pull out something that, I love sweatshirting fabric as well. So sort of more the sort of heavier stuff. And then again, looking at fabrics that I don't love so much, I've had this sort of viscose is something that I struggle with on my body. I just feel like my body appreciates a more structured fabric. So I've been looking at some of the viscose clothes that I don't wear, and I just think they just doesn't sort of hang well on my body. I don't know. I just don't love it.
Yeah.
But I love the fact that it comes in so many beautiful prints.
Yeah, and the colours really pop
They
nicely, don't they,
do,
on
they do.
viscose?
So I do viscose crepe. I quite like, or slightly more textured viscose. I will keep. Yeah, so I'm sort of still playing around that area with that fabric.
Yeah, I don't love that you end up having to iron viscose before you
Exactly,
put it
it
on.
is a bit of a one, isn't it? Like that. So yeah, I
Yeah,
don't love
even if
ironing.
you put it in the wardrobe ironed, when you bring it out, it needs ironing
And
again.
the minute you sit and move, it's going to just get crumpled. I think that's probably why I like, Ankara and denim. It doesn't seem to do that. Yeah, I don't know. So I've had to sort of think about those sort of categories. And you know how we're like, we make a pattern, well, some of us, we make a pattern, think, great, I've done that, and don't necessarily repeat it, even though it looks great on you and you wear it a lot. You kind of think, well, obviously that's what I like. Let's make another one. You kind of think,
Yeah.
no, let's try a new pattern or whatever. So I'm trying.
Oh, it's hard, isn't it, when there's patterns coming at you every 5
Yes,
seconds
yes.
and they look beautiful.
Oh,
You know, obviously they've done a beautiful photo shoot and the samples on the models look
yeah.
amazing. And
Like, I want to go
yeah, and you're
there.
like,
I
and
want to
it's
do that.
hard to think like, do I need that? Would that fit in my wardrobe? You have to have a real filter, don't you? You
Yeah,
have to have a filter on all the time of like, I need to filter this through my needs, my desires, my personal style, my lifestyle. And it's
absolutely.
hard. It's hard to have that filter up all the time,
It
isn't
is
it?
hard. It is hard to have a filter. And I think, especially if we lose our way when we focus too much on, I want to make content.
Yeah.
It's not just I'm making clothes for myself. I'm thinking about my social media, what's going to look nice on those squares. And you can just then think, I've got to make a really amazing outfit. And again, that's a kind of a real think about what you're doing, because you can make good content. And I think I love there's that hashtag, isn't there? Me made on repeat and things like that, because people like to see
Yeah, me made every day and things like that.
you're not always got something brand spanking new, and you can be more creative with how you do that. But I think sometimes the idea that you're making things and you're thinking about how you're going to present that on social media can be a problem. So you've got to sort of work through that.
I totally know what you mean. And I mean, two of the garments that I've made
Mm,
that I made because I was representing the fabric.
mm,
They're both garments that I do really enjoy, and I have literally worn one of them to death. But both of them were a bit of a stretch for me in
okay.
terms of my personal style initially. And they've got so many likes, and people literally saying, "This is the nicest thing I've ever seen you make." And I was like, oh, okay,
Yes.
but this isn't necessarily how I
Sure,
feel.
sure.
Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like,
yeah.
I don't know if this represents me, and you're like, this is the nicest thing you've ever made. It's got all the likes, and I'm like,
That's really
this is interesting.
interesting. Yeah, that is really interesting. That is I can totally see that people would do that. I love to try new things. I love to try new skills and things like that. But again, I'm just thinking, but is this something I'm going to wear and appreciate? Is that me?
Yeah. And obviously, you are one of the faces of Ankara Appreciation
Yes,
Week.
yes.
Do you feel, I don't know if pressure's the word, but do you feel like you want to make different types of garments in Ankara to show how versatile it
Mm.
is, what you could do with it? Do you feel almost like a sense of pressure to represent it and maybe make things that possibly you wouldn't necessarily gravitate to making, just so you can show that it can be made in Ankara?
Yeah, I think I have felt a bit like that, especially early on when we started. But I think the fact that it is something I want to encourage and find lots of different people who make with Ankara, I don't feel that pressure on myself. I remember sort of doing some posts saying, actually, this is my style. My style is more every day. But wow, you want to follow such and such a person. Just look what she's made out of Ankara. I think I'd much rather do that with the Ankara
Sure.
appreciation. I go around and find some people who are just amazing, and that's their style. They love to do things. They do things with boning and big structures, or they do really glam things, as well as those who are just using it to make a lovely pair of dungarees or a little A-line skirt and things like that. So there is variety. I've sort of tried to take that pressure off myself to make the variety.
Great. And I guess as it's become popular and it's gone on more and more and more, you've accrued
Yes,
more resources
absolutely.
showing Ankara in these different
Yeah, and
spheres.
I think for both Juliet and I, because I think we're both, our styles in some ways a bit similar. So we're not necessarily making all this super high end stuff, but it's just wonderful. We've got people in the community that are. It can be a pressure. I know when I made a blazer, the heather blazer, thinking, oh, that's a bit of a stretch. Is that something I'm going to wear, out of Ankara fabric? But
Yeah.
it absolutely is, and I love it. I have no regrets for making that one and making sort of a pair of trousers to match it. So it's a bit of a suit. And that was, for me, that was a bit of a stretch, because I'm a blazer person. Am I going to wear such a loud blazer? Absolutely love wearing it as a suit and separate. So yeah, I've occasionally sort of gone out a little bit of my comfort or my normal zone, and it's worked.
Yeah. Absolutely. And sometimes it is good to push yourself a slight bit, isn't
Yes,
it?
yeah.
But as you were saying, kind of maybe like you love that fabric, but maybe push yourself slightly with the style.
Yes.
Or maybe you know that it's a pattern that you've already made that you love, but maybe try a different fabric
Mm.
or a different view that maybe you wouldn't have. Do you know what I mean? Like there's
Yeah.
ways to kind of, experiment that isn't like all out, this is a wild card, this could go any
Yeah,
way.
yeah. And there's some patterns that I have repeated and just tweaked a little bit and added your own, which we're doing as creatives all the time, aren't we? And I think that's really great because you make it completely your own, don't you, when you do that?
Yeah, for me, that's one of the things that I loved about starting to sew. I didn't want to walk into a pub and there's another woman
Yes.
over there in the same, Topshop
Yeah,
dress
yeah,
or
yeah, yeah.
H&M jacket. And then I wonder, as you were saying, like maybe we are almost replicating, whether or not we're choosing to, some of the aspects of fast fashion in our
Yeah,
sewing. And
I get that because I was looking at a lot of the stuff and I saw so many of these sort of, I'm not quite sure what you call them, the dresses with the puff sleeves and whatever, there's a lot of those and they
yeah,
look great and I've got a couple of myself, but I'm like, we're all wearing the same clothes.
yeah,
Let's do something different, but it
yeah.
is, we have, I suppose the sewing world has got their own little thing that we
Yeah,
all do.
exactly. But you know what? It's really funny as well. Sometimes when I'm out and about and I see a woman, say in a playground or something, and she's wearing a dress or a blouse or something that is similar to a sewing
Yeah,
pattern, but it's obviously a ready to wear. I'm like, oh, this isn't just the sewing
that is
community,
true.
like this goes deeper. Like it shocks me because I'm so I'm so kind of in this little
Bubble,
bubble,
yeah,
and
yeah.
then I forget that there's, because I just don't go in shops now, and I forget that there
Yeah,
are,
same, yeah.
yeah, that it's not just this kind of echo chamber, that it is referencing
But outside,
outside trends,
exactly. And
and I
like, oh,
forget.
these are being worn by other people.
Yeah, and I feel like going to them, you could make that, like you could use the Tilly the Button
Yeah,
pattern
yeah,
or
yeah,
whatever
yeah.
to make
That's
something
that's
really
really funny,
similar.
isn't it? When you know the pattern that somebody like, oh, that looks like this dress I've seen, or that looks like that
Yeah.
jumpsuit.
I feel like tapping them on the shoulder going, you know what, you could make that, I can help you.
What we like.
Why would you shop? Yeah, I know. So you've been analysing your clothing, figuring out what you want going forward, bringing your making back towards your initial aim. Have you found yourself adjusting or reframing that original aim in any way, or you still feel it's true to what you want to be representing and what you want to be making?
Sure. I think my original aim, I'm sticking to that. I think what has changed is just my style of clothing has changed, I guess. I think when I
Yeah.
first wrote that, I had in my mind the kind of person I was and the kind of clothes I was wearing at that time. But I've evolved and I'm enjoying wearing different things than I was sort of 5 years ago, even as short a time as that. For example, I love wearing jumpsuits, and I would not have been wearing jumpsuits a few years ago. I was too conscious of my body and everything, and silly things kept saying they don't suit you, or whatever, but
Right.
that kind of thing. And I feel, no, this is something which I find useful and easy to wear. I want to just pick up something, pull it on, and go. And yeah, dresses fulfill
Do you
that.
feel that's because now you are more able, you have the skills to make those jumpsuits fit you,
Absolutely. It was
so you don't feel conscious of certain parts of
That's
your body?
exactly it. I used to feel really depressed going shopping, seeing a jumpsuit, for example, trying it on and finding that it was just awful on me. It just was too tight and weird places. But now I'm making my own clothes. I make all those adjustments and I can put this on and think, why did I ever think that I couldn't wear jumpsuits? I could. It's that I didn't find the one to fit me. So yeah, definitely sewing my own clothes has just made me feel more free in exploring different things. So I'm not just holed up into one style. And so I'm really, really thankful that I can sew my own clothes. Even with dresses, getting the right proportions. I'm different on top to at the bottom. So when you're, a size 12 or a size 14 somewhere may not fit very well, but when you know that you can change the hips and you can put a size 12 top and a size 14 bottom, life's easy, isn't
Yeah, you're speaking to me.
it? Life is so much easier, and then you can wear those styles that you thought you could never wear before. So
Absolutely. I completely relate to that so much, because I spent all of my kind of teens and 20s until I started making my own clothes, because I'm definitely like one size up here, and then kind of from my belly down I'm the next
yeah,
size, and I always had tops, if they were fairly close fitting, they would fit great round here but be a bit too tight, and I feel so confident, conscious of
yeah.
my belly, or it'd feel too loose and a bit horrible up here and kind of be fine there. And it was such a revelation to discover that I could blend sizes, and I didn't have to have that self-conscious, and it genuinely changed my self-esteem. I was just always so aware of my stomach, aware of how I was sitting, because I thought it was,
Yeah. Oh, you having said that makes me think that, an addition to sort of my aims would be to that joyful, it is about raising your self-esteem. I can't tell you how much more confident I am in wearing clothes from sewing my own clothes. It gives you that confidence. It just means that you've got clothes that are fitting you well, and that just elevates how you walk, how you enjoy life. I think have, as well as looking at the colours and the style and the fabric, I'm really looking at clothes that give me joy. And
yeah.
I do think that relationship you have with your clothes, I know it sounds a bit petty, but I think it's so important.
I don't think that it is petty, because you literally have to interact with clothing every single day and all day. It's like you have to interact with food, and you have to interact with the air. It's literally on your body. It's how people see you. It's almost how some people read
Yeah,
you. Well, it is, isn't it? It's a
It's
language.
isn't it? And I think when I turned 50, I did this little thing on Instagram where I looked at clothes over the decades and my style and the things and how I related to clothes at that style. And it just really made me think about just the importance my style played or the pressures that other people thought, oh, Lena, you should wear this kind of clothing because you're a black woman even in that there's people telling you what to wear and how to wear
Yeah.
clothes, and so much in there. There's such a relationship you have with the clothing, and other people read you, as you say. But me coming to my own, I think I came to my own quite late in life. So I feel more confident. So this is me. I'm not too bothered about what you think about my clothes. I'm wearing my style, and that confidence,
Yeah.
I undoubtedly has come through making my own clothes. I rarely shop. I'm not anti shop bought clothes, but I just don't feel the need to most of the time. I don't knit. I don't knit. I can knit, but I don't knit. So knitwear is what I'm buying more often if I go shopping. But generally, I just want to make my own stuff, and I I am getting to that annoying stage of I can make that. I'm not spending that much, but sometimes I do end up spending more on something I could have made.
Yeah.
That's the reality, isn't it? So because I enjoy it, and because I put so many hours into making my clothes, I don't want them to sit there unused. I want to be wearing the clothes that I make. So I'm just thinking I'd rather sort of sew less and actually wear the things I have. And I say I'd rather sew less, and I'm like, oh, but would I? I love sewing.
It's so complicated,
It
isn't it?
is. But that's when I think it was you in one of the podcasts you made talking about the fact that, yes, we love making clothes, but there's other things we can do, like mending the clothes, which I'm really poor at because I'm like, the pile just sits there, or venturing to a slightly new hobby that still uses your sewing techniques, but it's not sewing garments. Like I used to do a lot of bag making actually
Yeah.
before. And that's something I'd love to go back to. Quilting or something that is still sewing, but you're not
Yeah.
just adding more and more garments just because.
Yeah.
So that again, being more thoughtful.
Yeah. But I mean, I've seen you made a jumpsuit, and you then at a later date went back and you put some elastic in the back, didn't you?
Yes, yeah, yeah.
So you say they just sit there, but I've seen you. You should give yourself
That's
credit.
true. I should give myself credit. I should. Yeah, and I'm finding more increasingly when I make jumpsuits, that's something I tend to do at the end. But yeah, I sort of wear the clothes, reflect on them, think, oh, that didn't work, or I'm going to add ties to it, or put the elastic, or shorten the leg, and things like that. So I do stuff so that those things I love, I want to be able to wear them. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
No, yeah, exactly. And I think that this is what it's something that I'm trying to do more in my own sewing and my own wardrobe. And it's something that I would like to encourage more people to do as well, because I think so often we make a garment and we're like, right, that's finished. And it's like we either wear it or we don't, and it's working or it's
Yeah,
not. And it's like we have the skills to go back in and do something to
yeah,
it.
yeah,
Whether
yeah,
that's something super dramatic like turning a dress into a top, or if it's something simple, not simple because I know it's not simple, but something
yeah,
less invasive like putting a bit of elastic or putting some
yeah.
ties into something. Yeah, I think that that's so important. I think that's something that all us sewers could do a bit more of, really.
Yes, and that's another thing. So looking through my wardrobe, I pulled out some clothes, but I think, well, I do love the fabric, but I don't love it as it is, and I want to change it. So I have got a little pile of a skirt, a lovely Ankara skirt, which I find is too full for my style now. I've got, is it the Wilder dress, Friday pattern couple? I've got that, and I have worn that dress several times, but each time I'm just not that happy with it. So it's there, and I want to do something different to it. Not quite sure what, but I want to work with that.
I have to admit, I've got a little pile like that from 2 Me Made Mays ago.
Oh, wow, yes. So it even happens to the greatest.
Oh, bless you, it's hardly the greatest. But sometimes it's the motivation, and then sometimes it's like I don't quite know how to approach that. So it's like I'm sitting on that until it comes to me.
And it comes to you. And I mean, some people I've seen, one lady who just like you say, cut the dress and just made a skirt and a top, and it looked amazing. Like, come on, Lena, you just need that confidence or that time to just do it. But yeah, I'm not quite sure with that Wilder gown at the moment, but it'll come to me.
Yeah. Well, I've been trying to implement this make one, mend one rule, but mend I also include alter. So it's just kind of, I hate the word forcing, but forcing myself to slowly tackle the bits that I've assigned for mending or for altering, whether that's, turning my son's joggers into shorts because he's busted through the knee, or it's a garment of my own, like I don't like the neckline or whatever. So just trying to keep myself a little bit accountable to those things that I said I was going to do,
That's really good. That's really good, isn't it? And that's, again, go back to that. You said, don't like the word forcing, and I was a bit nervous about discipline. I think as people who create and things like that, maybe we're afraid. Sometimes it sounds a bit too serious, and it's, I don't know, stopping our creativity. But I think sometimes that sort of discipline, it does help with our creativity and, repairing something and then making something new. You feel, I'm doing good in both aspects, aren't I? I'm not neglecting those things that need work or whatever, but
Yeah. And it can be creative as well, can't it? Like
definitely
figuring out how to rework something. That can be a creative challenge in and of itself.
Absolutely. Like, I sometimes just staring at things for ages, thinking what to do. How can I make this? And I think, I could just put a dart here, and that really, brings shape in or whatever. So it's all the process. You're still using that creativity, like you say.
I feel it could be almost in some ways feel more creative than when you're just not kind of going through the motions, but you've got a pattern, you've got a fabric, and you know what to do. You cut the pattern out and you put it on the fabric, and then you follow the instructions. And sometimes for me, that doesn't feel like, because I've been sewing for a long time as yourself, sometimes that doesn't feel particularly creative. Like I'm really into it and I enjoy the flow state and I'm getting a lot of kind of benefit from it, and it's a garment that I want to wear. Sometimes I don't really feel I'm flexing many creative muscles with that. Do you know what I mean?
I get that. And that's one of my reasons why I sometimes think, no, Lena, I'm not going to buy a new pattern. I am going to try to mash some patterns together or adapt things to just be the way I like them to be. And it was really funny, actually. I was, a while ago, I made a dress. I made one of those Victoriana dresses. And I made it. I was scouring around, couldn't find the right pattern, but I had some patterns that I thought might work. And I did mash them together, pulled a sleeve from one pattern, a bodice from another, that kind of thing, and added my own sort of touches to it. And that was so enjoyable, just piecing those together. I wasn't doing it from scratch. I'm not a designer by any means, but just putting together these elements from different patterns and working out how I was going to make that dress look like, raising the neckline a bit. And, I'm quite short-waisted, so put it, getting all those adjustments. And I was so happy with the dress. It was just amazing. And then 2 weeks later, Fabric Godmother comes out with the peony dress, and I'm like, that would have made my life. But guess what's on my cutting table right now? It's the peony pattern, so I am going to get to make it.
Oh, bless you. This is kind of how I feel about the way that the indie sewing pattern world, I mean, it's amazing. There's so much creativity. There's so many cool styles out there. But literally, when I started Me Made May, the first one I did was Me Made March, and I was literally on my own, solo. I'm going to just wear what I've made.
Oh.
I had two tops. I had two warm tops. I had like a jumper that I'd adapted from a t-shirt pattern, and I had a cardigan that I'd adapted from that jumper pattern, because there just wasn't the variety of sewing patterns available. Like literally now you can think up most designs, can't you? And there's something very close out there already.
Yes.
You can go on the Fold Line website, or you can go on the Fabric Goblin website or whatever, and find something close. But there just wasn't, and you had to kind of work for it a bit more. And I think that that was a real barrier to entry for a lot of people, probably. But I kind of miss it a little bit as well, that kind of enforced creativity, that enforced kind of like, come on, right, let's make this happen. Yeah, the challenge, that's it. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm not saying I would want them all to disappear, because I don't, but...
Exactly. I love the fact that these patterns are coming out and you get all these ideas, but you kind of, I don't know, I'm really funny because I feel like, I've got to buy the patterns, I've got to support.
Yeah, well, that's another thing as well. You want those independent people to...
Exactly, and I do want to do that, and I think, well, there are other ways of supporting. That's what we need to remember. I do share a lot and things like that, rather than saying I have to buy everything.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do more of as well.
You can't buy everything, but you kind of feel that, I want them to thrive. I love them. I can't buy all the patterns. I can't buy all the fabric.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I completely agree. I kind of just feel like maybe especially with the fabric, maybe if less fabric was bought from the big, and I think maybe this is more like the more US situation, where those big box warehouses of fabric, maybe buy less from them, more from the independent family owned smaller ones. Easy for me to say, but I think that there is a way that we can both be thoughtful in our consumption and support the smaller people who often give so much support to the sewing community back, don't they? With all the sew-alongs and support and everything.
I do agree, and I'm always just trying to be a bit careful, because sewing is something that can be quite, if you've got the money and if you've got the time, and I know these are privileges that not everybody has, and so I'm often thinking, when my mum was sewing, she fitted it in, raising the three of us, and she would buy most of her fabric from the market. Polycotton, cotton, polyester, and whatever. That was, 70s and 80s or whatever. So
we didn't know about microplastics then.
No, we didn't. That is so true. So there was all of this sort of stuff there. So I want to be more careful. And I'd rather, I guess what you said, I'd rather buy sort of less and have good stuff and thoughtful, mindful stuff, rather than just buying and buying and buying. But it's hard. It's hard sewing mindfully, I think.
In a capitalist system.
Yes, it really is. When we're bombarded with so much, aren't we? And we are tempted to just buy into it all. And I'm thinking, no, isn't that the fast fashion mindset that we're running from? Some of us are. Let's not do that in our sewing. That's, how I feel.
Absolutely. Right, so let's pivot slightly.
Yes.
So something that I like to discuss on this podcast is the sustainability of sewing, in the sense of like how we sustain sewing in our life. And specifically when life kind of gets busy or challenging, perhaps when children come along, like you were saying yourself, like when your children were tiny, you didn't have so much time to sew, or when we change jobs, or when we take on a caregiving role, or when money is tight as well. How can we keep our sewing going so we are getting that enjoyment, we are getting those kind of mental health benefits? And I read on your blog that whilst acknowledging that sewing is important for you as an act of self-care, it's also one of the first things that you've found that you've let go of when life gets tough, because to a certain extent it's felt on some level frivolous. And I just think that is so incredibly relatable, and you've agreed to explore this topic with me, so I'm very grateful for that. So I was really wondering if you could explain a little bit more about that feeling, and then maybe you could update us a bit on how you're feeling now, or how you've kind of combated those feelings.
Sure. Yeah. I'll put a bit of history, a background on that, actually.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm at a stage in my life where my teenager really needs a lot of support, and we've had various issues going on around her. And so I know, although obviously when my girls were young, that was a tight time, but actually the teenage years have been really, really tough for my teen.
Right.
So my life is quite busy caring and being there for her. So I've been really, really busy, and meeting after meetings. And I was at one session with our family therapist where it was one of those sessions where every time I opened my mouth to talk, I would just cry. And in the
Oh,
end,
bless you.
the therapist was like, what are you doing to look after yourself? What are you doing to give you joy? What is there? Now she'd already known I talked about my hobbies before, but she got me to talk about it. And I said, you know what, sewing gives me so much joy. I love to sew, but I haven't been doing much of it recently because I've been
Right.
so busy. And she said, stop and just make time for it. And I thought, well, how could I? Because sewing just seems, it's just your hobby, Lena. Just, it's something on the side. You're not making any money from it. It's just, that doesn't seem like a good use of time. But just hearing her sort of say, no, you really do need to look after yourself. You need a bit of happiness and that sort of me time that is not in a kind of selfish, I'm not thinking about anybody else way, but it's when you're looking after yourself, you can then give. We know that saying, you can't serve from an empty platter, that kind of idea. And I was just like, oh, thank you, that's really good. I needed to hear that, But it did feel hard because I felt I've got real issues going on that really involve my time. How can I just sit stroking this amazing fabric and making something seems a bit silly? But she was absolutely right. And I have tried my hardest to just carve out a few moments within, in the week to try to just sew, think about sewing, plan my sewing so that I'm not only thinking about the issues that are tough and the things that I have to do. I also want to do the things that I enjoy doing. So my thinking has changed, and I think it's part of my upbringing as well. Because although my mum was, like I said, she was sewing, she was also a really busy woman, really industrious and not one for sitting down with her feet up or whatever. So I kind of have the feeling I've got to be working all the time. But
Right.
I actually find sewing quite a restful thing to do when it's going well.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
even when it's not going well, it's a different kind of challenge and excitement. So I really want to make room for that. So I was really thankful for what that therapist said because it did help me. And the next few months after that were still tough, and I had to lay my sewing aside. But I had told myself, well, I will get back to it then. So I just taught myself through that and deal with things I need to in the present. But I don't want to just stop sewing because it's frivolous, because it isn't. It helps my mind, it gives me joy, it helps me focus on a different sort of challenge, and all of that helps me to be in a better place to deal with the challenges in my family.
Absolutely.
So that was some of my wrong thinking that needed help to sort of come through.
Yeah, but I don't think it's like just your wrong thinking. I think that it's in general, I think society has taught us that activities that are predominantly engaged with by women
Yeah,
aren't as important. Things that, I mean, obviously, sewing, you can use sewing to make money and you can use sewing to save money, but generally, the kind of sewing that we're doing, like by and large, is there's not a financial goal or
yeah,
motivator for doing it. So often I think activities that, as you were saying, like that don't have this kind of industrious connection to making money are devalued.
yeah,
So I think that these are messages that we've been told, and the portrayal of sewing is kind of predominantly female and kind of
yeah.
leisurely, and you just were reflecting that.
I think you're right. I feel you're right. You are, because you do get a lot of pressure within when you're sewing, that people are asking you, are you making money from it? Are you selling your stuff? You should do this.
Yeah, like, oh, you could sell
You
that.
can sell that. You can have a business. Is your business going right? It's not a business. It's just something I
Yeah,
do. So again, those sort of reinforce the fact that the idea that what you're doing is just a frivolous thing. It's what's the point of that? Where I think, well, no, actually, lots of people have hobbies, and I think a lot of guys have hobbies that we don't
yeah,
question in the same way.
yeah. When they go fishing, you're like, oh, you're selling those fish or
Yes,
whatever. No,
exactly.
people don't say
No,
that.
they don't. So I think, no, doing this it for me. I see sewing is my love. I really enjoy it, and it is an act of self care. Yeah, it just brings me joy. So I just don't want to be squeezing it out, and I will not allow people
Yeah.
to demean that as time wasting and obsessive in that negative way.
I mean, as I say, I really think that what you're saying is so, so relatable, sadly. Do you have any kind of practical, implementable suggestions for other people that are finding themselves in the same way deprioritizing their sewing? Have you got anything that you could suggest for other people that have found themselves in a similar situation?
I mean, yeah, first I was just say, just believe that what you're doing isn't frivolous and a waste. Try and get to that place where you think, no, this is a good thing. You are using a gift, or you're using a talent, or whatever, how you want to phrase it. You're using that to benefit yourself. And at the same time, that surely is going to benefit others around you, and you're in a better, happy space. So get that thinking right. But also don't put a lot of pressure on yourself to be sewing like all the time. There's somebody, I think it's an American lady called, I think she's Brittany or something, who does this thing of 30 minutes a day or something, where she just does 30 minutes of sewing a day and then puts it down. So just even doing those little things, like I often break my sewing down. I break it down in order to fit it all in. I know that I rarely am able to cut out a pattern and sew it all in one day, that kind of thing.
Never.
So you just sort of say, well, I'm going to trace the pattern today. I'm going to cut it tomorrow. Just break it into sort of chunks, bite-sized pieces.
And don't see that is like, what's the word? Don't see that is, oh, I can only do that. That's not the word. Do you know what I'm saying? Don't see that as like a kind of sad version. Like, see that as, it's an opportunity.
Yeah,
I took that opportunity.
I'm going to take that time to actually cut these pieces out. Great, put it down. And then tomorrow or 2 days' time, I'm going to do that.
Reframe it as, I pushed it forward.
That's it. And look, right, I'm adding the zip today or whatever. Just do those bite-sized things so that you're not sort of overwhelmed, like, I've not done any sewing. Or make it work. Because like I said, for me, I'm working on my dining table. I'm sewing in and around the family and their needs. So I can't be at the sewing machine all day, but that's okay. I can just do that little bit and do that little bit. So I think for me, that's quite helpful. Yeah.
And if you were sewing all day, your wardrobe would really be out of control.
It really would be out of control. And I would be here like, what am I doing? So, I think about sewing a lot, but that's in itself quite fun, planning and things like that without even sewing. So just drawing out your plans or,
Yeah, absolutely.
Can be a good thing.
I've got on my phone, I've got the Stash Hub app and I've got a Trello board. And between those two, I can have a lot of fun, a lot of sewing related fun without ever touching a bit of fabric.
Absolutely. Yeah, I do. I use my Pinterest for that, and that's really great. I just forever just pinning things and putting this. I'm going to make that. So looking at random people in the street and saying, I like your this, and then thinking, right, I've got to find something like that. So making plans, I really enjoy that. That's all a part of the process, isn't it? It's not necessarily the actual sewing. Yeah.
And then that's a good filter as well, isn't it? It's almost like, okay, well, I could make that. Having that plan, that's exercising that idea. It exists. Yes. It's out there.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So Lena, where can people find you?
Okay, that Lena King on Instagram, and then I've got the Unpick Stitch on WordPress. I've got blog posts there.
Fantastic. Brilliant.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful for you for giving me an hour of your morning. Thank you so much for talking to me about these things.
It's been lovely talking to you, Zoe. Thank you for reaching out.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. Thanks so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this episode and are left feeling inspired. For more info about the podcast, including show notes for this and every episode, head to checkyourthread.com. I'd love to hear from you, so if you have any comments, questions or ideas for future episodes, please get in touch by emailing zoe@checkyourthread.com or find me on Instagram @checkyourthread. Massive thanks to Patrick Potter for production support, to Sylvia Seller for the awesome logo design, and to Simon at Palm Skin Productions for the music. This ad-free podcast would not be possible without listener support, so if you feel you are able, please consider signing up to the Check Your Thread Patreon. For the equivalent of buying me a coffee each month, you'll be making it possible to continue producing regular episodes. Links can be found in the show notes and on the website checkyourthread.com. I hope you'll listen again next week. Until then, take care. Bye!